Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a prepared individual and a survivalist in today's day and age. I'm your host, Chris Bartagone, ZP002. Back with me as always, my co-host, Jamie Franks, X739D. Jamie, welcome back to the show, my man.
Thank you. Good to be here. I always look forward to these every week.
Yes, you and me both. You were just away and you got to experience some East Coast weather from the West Coast, and I guess you had a pretty good time, and you shared an amazing bourbon with me, and I am anxious to get my hands on some of that and give it a try.
Yeah, I bounced over to Tennessee real quick for work for just a couple of days, and then right back. But I'm originally from the South and from the East Coast, so I commented to my friends that were with me, the area of Tennessee where we were, it really looked like I had been transported back through time to my hometown in 1985, because my hometown is completely transformed and is. I always tell people, like, where I grew up no longer exists. You know, the latitude and longitude is the same, but the place where I grew up no longer exists. But the area of Tennessee where we were really was very, very reminiscent of my hometown when I was a kid. And yeah, I got to have some good food. I legit had like probably the best fried chicken I've ever had in my entire life. And I definitely had the best bourbon I've ever had. So I bought 2 bottles of it to bring back. It was $90 a bottle from the distillery, but it was
nice.
It was literally the best I've ever had. So I brought back 2 bottles and ate up the fried chicken.
And anybody that has been around ZERT long enough knows that ZERT did a barrel of Jack Daniel's whiskey. So we ended up, I think it was SHOT Show 2018. It was the year that I won the Hudson, and I was actually out there with the company that I was working for, and we had ZERT in the booth doing a Jack Daniel's tasting. So that was pretty awesome. There is talk and rumor of doing another barrel for the Outbreak event at the end of the year. So
from Jack Daniel's again?
From Jack Daniel's, yeah. So that'll be pretty cool if we can make that work. Again, it's just a rumor. It's just talk right now. Nothing is concrete. At the time of us recording this, I am heading to Texas to go scout the ranch. So by the time you guys listen to this, I'll have already been down there, got footage, and probably will have some exciting updates. So by the time we record next, you'll get to hear some of those updates. I'm sure that'll be a show that we do in its entirety. So talk about timeline and time travel, like you're experiencing it now. So isn't there was it Spaceballs? What was was there the whole thing about the Spaceball? Like it's in the past, but now it's in the future. Was that a whole skit in Spaceballs?
It's so in the movie Spaceballs, they put in the movie Spaceballs to try to watch it to see what happens, but they can only watch up to what's happening now.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
They can't fast forward past now, and so they're watching now on the screen.
Yeah, that'd be great. If I had any idea how to do all that post edit wise, I would do that now just to have a good time with it. But anyways, we've talked about a lot of things, and I know that there's going to be situations where we come back to a certain topic, and I know in the past we've talked about some of the essential skills, and I guess this would be another episode in the essential skills department, but we wanted to talk about fire making and understanding kind of the skill set involved, from basic rudimentary bow and string type up to using a Bic lighter or a Zippo lighter. But anyway, making fires on the weekends now in the fireplace is just it's the winter here in the Northeast, so I do it often. I will get out the ferro rod just to keep the the skill set, or the polished, I guess, if you will. But I also have a box of fireplace matches with a striker right on the box, and we use that just the same. So, we've talked about it. We've beat that whole mentality home that, yes, skills, having a skill outweighs having the gear, but man, it's nice and easy just lighting a long match and sticking it in the fireplace to light the fat wood, or I'm still use a tinder to start it, but you can use a bunch of different things. I like to take some of that firewood that I get and make feather sticks and use that to start it. But I figured it was a topic that you and I discussed, and I think it stands to be expanded on, right? Because a lot of times we go into these and we just give you 30,000 foot view, and it's time to kind of get in the weeds with some of these things, right?
Correct. So we've done through our podcast. Like I was always trained, like in the military, and even before I was in the military, I was always trained that your 4 priorities of survival in order are shelter, water, fire, and food. So this one actually, this will be it's your 3rd priority of survival, and this is the 3rd one we've talked about. We've talked about food prep, emergency food sources, things
Yep.
like that. We did a whole thing on sourcing water in emergency, purifying water, all that stuff. And so, yeah, so fire making, I would almost go so far as to say, because like this is something that's kind of like the backbone of bushcraft, type survival.
Yeah.
And
Right.
one might be able to do a weekly podcast and never talk about anything other than making fire, because there's so many different ways you can do it. There's so much gear on the market, and I mean, I'm sure we'll get into that, the importance of having a skill set versus gear. But there's it seems like there's always some kind of new gadget that's coming out. But it's funny how the one that comes to mind is the I think Gerber made it. It was called the Blast Match, and then
Right. Yep.
on the first few seasons of that show alone, like you literally saw a 100% failure rate on that Blast Match. Everybody that brought one, it failed. I've never actually even tried to use one. I've seen them online. I've seen people do videos about them, but I saw every single person that went on the show alone that tried to bring one of those Blast Matches, it failed. So
Really?
then you're back to where's your skill set at, and some of these tools are valuable. You brought up a ferro rod. I guess one of the things we can talk about is people constantly use the word primitive fire making, but really what where do you draw the line between what is primitive fire making and what isn't? Because is ferro rod primitive fire making? Like, kind
I
of.
mean, no, I mean, yes and no, but actually more on the side of no, in my opinion, because it's literally a rod that you bring in with you. Primitive fire building to me is Tom Hanks, Castaway, doing it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah,
Or,
we haven't talked about this, and I agree that if that would also be my definition of what is truly primitive fire making is you starting with nothing
right,
and
right,
using your surroundings to source the materials that you need to make a fire from nothing. So yeah,
right.
so I would also agree that I kind of, though I think the ferro rod is kind of on that line. If you're going to draw a line between what is and what isn't, ferro rod's kind of on the line. But yeah, I agree with your definition there.
Right. I mean, when you watch, and it's so funny because I think yesterday a video popped up about uh the Outdoor Boys um channel and how much it's grown over the time that he's been on the been on YouTube. And it was, I mean, it's huge. His channel has blown up, but every time you watch one of his videos when he's out in the woods making fire, he uses a ferro rod. he's not using a Bic lighter, but he's also not using a bow and, a stick to
Bow and drill. Yep.
bow and drill type situation that he's crafted out in the wild, if you will. Um, it's one thing if you have a bow and drill that you have crafted and you bring that with you and you've practiced on that. But again, primitive fire making is starting with nothing. And then,
Right.
so there, I think there's a lot to be said about that. The fact that, yeah, he goes out and he brings a ferro rod to use. He doesn't use a lighter. He doesn't bring, that's what he uses to start fires.
So ferro, I guess we just jump right in right there then, because ferro
Sure.
rods are my favorite bushcraft method. I'll call it that of
Yep.
starting a fire. Meaning not using a Bic lighter, not using a match, something like that.
I agree.
I like the ferro rod. It is my favorite. It's my favorite one to practice, and with practice, you can get quite good at it. My little rule of thumb, my little personal little rule is anytime I go camping, to get the fire started, all I can use is my ferro rod. So I have to like scout around the area where I'm camping to try to find things to use as tinder, because one of the things that Les Stroud always pointed out in the show Survivor Man is no matter how remote of a location he went to all over the globe, you can always find something that was left behind by some other person at some point in time. So you can almost always find a little scrap of paper or a little scrap of cloth or a little scrap of napkin or toilet paper or whatever. You can almost always find something, and then all the natural tinder. And then I'll scout around and gather, because I was a Boy Scout when I was a kid. I was a Tiger
Right.
Cub, then I was a Cub Scout, and I was a Weeblo, and then I was a Boy Scout. I never did Eagle, but going all the way back to my Boy Scout days, they taught us to start a fire. You have to start with tinder, which their definition of tinder was like something that can catch a spark.
Right.
If from tinder, you go to kindling. Kindling, you go to small sticks, and then once you get a little fire going with small sticks, then you can add logs. I've been camping with many people over the years that think you can just take a match and light a log and it's just going to start on fire, and it
Right.
does not usually
No,
work
it
that
does
way.
not.
But
So
but
let's well, hold on. Let's go back to your Tinder and your acquisition of Tinder. I think what it's key to point out here is understanding what you can use as Tinder and what you can't use as Tinder. You need to use something that catches really quick. Little sticks broken up into a small pile is not going to be Tinder.
no,
Um,
the key
Go
to
ahead.
tinder is, remember, the key word to tinder is fluffy. Anything that
Right.
fluffy or anything that you can make fluffy is going to be tinder. It's going to be able to catch that spark. It has to be these tiny little like microscopic, almost like fibers that you can make.
Fibers, right.
And so anything that's fluffy is the key word for tinder. So
And you can create fluffy. I mean, there's like bark, but not like birch. Like you can peel that white birch, like you can peel those layers off, right? And you can create that fluffy atmosphere, if you will, or that you need to catch that spark to then build on top of. And all of and I guess don't be shy with it. Don't sit there and grab the smallest little bunch. Get a big bunch, get as much as you can. So I just wanted to kind of point that out with the Tinder side of it. But go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to go back to the ferro rod real quick. Like ferro rods are great because a good ferro rod is like the size of your pinky finger. I
Right.
literally have one, and it's in my little kit it's one that I actually use all the time, and it's starting to get a little worse for wear. But I think I bought it in 2005 or 6. So I mean, what is that? 18 years ago, I've had this same ferro
Yeah.
rod that I've still used quite a bit. So you can get a huge amount of lifespan out of a good ferro rod. You can use it almost anywhere. And talking about going to Tennessee last week, I have a ferro rod that stays in my little carry-on backpack, and you can carry a ferro rod anywhere. I can't carry a cigarette lighter on a plane, but I can have a
Right.
ferro rod in my backpack. I have one in my truck. I have one in all of my little kits that, my go bag, all that stuff, because it's this big and it's a little rod. And again, with a lot of practice, you can be very effective. And like you're talking about the outdoor boys, like you can become very, very adept at starting a fire with a ferro rod when you learn what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. And what I like about it is once you do use it a lot, you practice a lot, you can throw that spark where you want it to go. There are
Exactly.
there are methods to use a ferro rod. And initially, they're and it does not take a lot to understand it and to make it work. Most of them are, like you said, that size. They've got ones that are 6 inches long, and they are hexagonal, which so they have a flat surface on them. Some of
Mhm.
them are round. There are a bunch of different types. A lot of them, and I'm going to butcher the name of it. It's like Uber something, Uber Leven, I don't know, is a brand that makes a great ferro
Lederhosen.
rod that, yeah, Lederhosen, that comes with the striker on attached to a leather strap, and there you go. I mean, that's that one. It's got a little a little thumb groove on the end of it, and some are just a straight up um rod. And you know you can use your knife to create the spark, or you can use the little scraper that they send with it. So
Use the backside of your knife, by the way.
you
If you're
yeah, exactly, use the backside of your knife. But yeah, so you know multi-tool, the whole deal. Leatherman actually makes a multi-tool that has a ferro rod
No kidding.
in. Yeah, they do. Yep.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's one of their I'll have to get the name of it. But yeah, so go ahead there with the with the continuing on of your point there with.
Yeah, that was it. Like a ferro rod is very low signature, and like I said, one of the ones that I have literally actively been using for whatever I said, 16 or 18 years now, and it still works fine. You can carry them anywhere. You can have it on your keychain. You can have one in your car. You can have one in your backpack. It'll go through TSA, and with a little bit of practice, it's a great way to start a fire. I have a very, very high success rate. I can't claim 100% success rate, but I do have a very high success rate, and the one I prefer is it's the brand is Light My Fire. And I've just found this one to be the one that works the best for me. Again, we've talked a lot about Exotac on these shows. Exotac has one also
Yes.
that's a pretty good one. But the one that I prefer, that I've had the most success with, and I think I have, because like I said, I have one in my backpack and one in my truck and one in my go bag and all that stuff. It's I have the
Right.
Light My Fire brand, but
Yeah.
those are good. That's
So
kind of the line in the sand, I think, between what
yeah.
is and isn't primitive fire making. Yeah.
I agree. That's a good. So the Leatherman is the signal, coincidentally, and the ferro rod that I was referring to is actually I nailed it. It's Uberleben, and it is hexagonal. So it's got the two little dots above the U as well. So if I'm not
I might get
pronouncing
one
that
of
right,
those just so I can say it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Uberleben. But
Uberleben.
Uberleben.
Da.
So yeah, so I agree, and
Uberleben to light my Zigaretten.
exactly. And it's funny to watch. So yes, you can start a fire with that. You can also start your camp stove with
Mhm.
a, with a. So it's not just to make fire, but it all
That's actually.
starts with. I'm sorry.
So I was going to say that's actually a really good point. I've got a jet boil,
Yeah.
and I have one of the older model. I have a new one too that works great, but I have an older model one that the little igniter stopped working, and yeah, that works great for that too. Because
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So but again, it's not going to do anything without the right um tinder. And I believe you can also the ferro rods are weatherproof or waterproof. I mean, you
yeah,
don't have to worry about them being soaked and you can't use it.
correct.
You will have to figure out the right setup if you are trying to make a fire in the rain, but it can be done.
Yes, it can. I did a but my daughter and I camped in a like really high altitude campsite in Colorado in a rainstorm and desperately needed to get the fire going. And everything was wet and the sun was going down quick, and it was gonna, as soon as the sun went down, it was gonna get cold. So in that one specific instance, I was not able to source dry tinder, because there's ways you can dry out tinder. In the military, they always stress the importance of wearing like wool socks. And so you can do this. There's like this little technique you can do where you just do these tiny little pinches with your hand, and you just pinch, 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 pinch on your wool socks, and you pinch off all the fuzz on your wool socks. And typically, because your wool socks are inside your boot or they're under your pant leg, you can pinch off a little cotton ball sized. Eventually, it takes about 5 minutes to do it. But you'll get like a cotton ball size, or even a little bit larger cotton ball size of fairly dry tinder
Right.
off your wool sock that can catch a spark. If time is on your side and you have some damp tinder, like one of the things that I was taught in the military was put it down your shirt or down the front of your pants for a couple of hours, and your body heat will dry it out enough for it to take a spark. But in this one situation with my daughter, we were, like I said, we were in a really high altitude campsite in Colorado, and like I just couldn't do it. So like I had to turn to like another piece of gear
Yeah.
for the tinder, and this is some really good. It's called Mini Inferno all weather fire, and it almost looks like it comes in this little tin, and it
Yeah.
looks like a Pringles chip when
Yep.
you take it out, and there's several in there. But that one, with the rain pouring down, I was able to use my ferro rod and that little tinder that I brought with me in that can, and was able to get a fire going while we were in a pretty significant rainstorm. So
Yeah. So, the primitive side of that is gathering and sourcing your own tinder while in the wild, but or while in the wilderness. But it also, we talk about it a lot, and it just, we're gonna drive it home here. One is none and two is one. So
mhm.
the one is none is just relying on what you're going to find in the wilderness. The two is bringing something that you can use, whether it's a fire plug, whether it's two fire plugs. We do talk about Exotac, and one of those little lighters, you can, I think you can smash one or two fire plugs in that, in the body of the lighter, right?
There's the little things that like I think it's what you're talking about. I know them as a Tender Quick. It's the ones that they almost look like a little miniature tampon. Is that the ones you're talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So
think
I've
one of the brands calls them fire plugs.
yeah, I don't know.
They
Years
look,
and years ago.
they literally look like earplugs, just made
Yeah,
of material that you can
and
light.
those are fantastic. Little for I don't even know when or where I started calling them that, but I've always called them a Tender Quick. But yeah, for if you're watching this on video, this is the Exotech Nano
Yeah,
Spark.
yeah, that's
And
it.
so it's almost like a cigarette lighter. It just has a flint striker, but without the fuel source that a
Yeah,
cigarette lighter would have. But then you unscrew the handle, and yeah, there's
yeah, there it
one,
is.
what I call a Tinder Quick, what Chris called a fire plug, in there, and those are phenomenal, and they are. This is like a little pro tip. You can, if you're bringing something like this, you can take some Vaseline, like, and it has to actually be like Vaseline, and put a light coating of Vaseline on it, and that makes it waterproof, and it'll also make it where it'll still take a spark in like heavy rain, because these are pretty good where if it's
Right.
just like light rain, or if it's just a little bit damp or whatever, you can still fluff it up and it'll still take a spark. But if it's really really wet, just a light coating of Vaseline on there will make it take a spark even when it's wet. And these things burn. Once you get them to take a spark, they'll burn for like 5 minutes. So that's
Yes,
plenty
yeah,
of time again to get
yeah,
your kindling and your small sticks on there and get your fire going.
yeah, and there's a bunch of hacks to, to make um some other fire starting I guess tinder. We'll call it tinder.
Yep.
But it's gear, right? It's not natural gear. But char rope is another one, and
Yarch.
you can make that. So there is a bunch of that. But so that's, I mean, that's the start of it, right? And that's just the start of it. Once you've got that, we'll just say it's a handful of tinder, and you're ready to light it. Unless you're using what you just talked about, which lasts a little bit of time, you don't have all the time in the world to get that thing going. Don't sit there and get your tinder ball lit, and then you're going to start gathering what you're going to put on top of that, because you are going to have a bad day. You are not going, more than likely, you are not going to be warm by the fire in minutes. You made a very good point where most people think it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, light this up and then throw a log on it. It's like, no, not going to cut it. You need a lot of heat and you need a lot of energy to start burning those big logs. So it's about being prepared, right? So prepare the next step of your fire building.
Yes, especially when you're in a situation where like you kind of need fire quick, or or again when you're in a situation where you like legitimately need fire because you need to purify this drinking water or whatever it is. Preparation is key. It's just like when you're painting your house. Like the more preparation you put in, the better it's going to go. You
Right.
can not prepare, that's fine, but you're not going to have a good time. So they're like in fire building, bushcraft fire building or primitive fire building, whichever one we want to call it. There's all these like little rules of thumb, but at the most basic, I guess scientific level, there's the fire triangle. The three sides of the triangle are heat, fuel, and air. You need all three of those things for a fire to happen. If you take away any one of those, then fire becomes impossible. So you have to have a heat source, which again is either using a bow and drill, or kind of like the method, I don't even know what it's called, just like the friction method that Tom Hanks used in
Oh, right. Yeah.
Castaway, which is a legitimate method as long as you have
Yep.
like the correct of types of wood that can do that. But you need something to make a heat source or something to make a spark. You need fuel, which again, your fuel is your tinder, then kindling, then small sticks, then wood. But you got to start with that tinder and kindling to get it going, and then it has to be able to get air, which also is kind of what you saw in Castaway.
Right.
Is he was doing the friction method on the with two pieces of wood there, like a flat piece of wood and then a round piece of wood, rubbing them together and making friction heat. And he started to get a little ember, but he couldn't actually get a flame to light because he figured out it wasn't getting any air. So all he had to do was split that wood, and that made a little avenue for air to go through as he was creating that friction. And he completed the fire triangle and got heat and fuel and air to mix and got a fire. So which the only, I guess, the only true primitive fire making method I've ever used and been successful with. I've tried a few different ones. Like like the shit that you would see like in the Flintstone cartoons, like rubbing two sticks together or like knocking two rocks together
Oh, right.
to
Right.
make a
To
spark
create
and stuff like
yeah.
that. With those types of things, again, those even though you saw them in a Flintstone cartoon, like though that can work, but the material has to be very specific types of stones and stuff like that. But the bow and drill, like I went camping with some friends here in Big Bear, California, a couple years ago, and I just decided, like, you know what, I'm not going to use any. I'm going to just trek off into the woods and find the things that I need, and I'm going to make a bow and drill and start a fire. And so, with nothing except really my pocket knife, I found everything I needed to make a bow and braided together some cordage out of raw material,
Right.
and made the little, I forget what it's the bow, the drill, the gosh, I can't think of the you have to have a third piece to put on top of the drill to hold it, so it does, for it to
Right.
rotate. A block, I guess, is what it's, uh, and then the base part, where you
Right.
actually generate the friction, and so and it took me a couple of hours, which is another thing to point out is when you're doing something like that. And again, I think they did a fair job at illustrating it in the movie Castaway. It took the way it's played out in the movie is basically took him an entire day to figure out
Right.
how to make this work and to get it going. And I mean, even as somebody that has a fair background in doing this kind of stuff and a fair foundation of knowledge and experience, my
Oh
friends
yeah.
just thought I was an idiot because they were all sitting around by their fire drinking beer by the time I got my little fire
Right.
going, and I was so excited. But I literally started with nothing except my pocket knife, and I went off into the woods and found everything I needed to make. And it's a very long process of trial
Well,
and
yeah,
error
that right. Right.
to actually get it going and make it work.
Right. And then even still, so again, that starts with that tinder, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then it's great once that tinder goes, but if you don't have the next part of your plan ready, as, then you're screwed. And
Yep.
what I recommend is, like you just said, you start with that tinder, and then you need those little sticks, that little kind of nest, almost like a beaver nest, right? I mean, it's just
Mhm.
all these little pieces of of dried out wood. Hopefully it's dried wood or dead wood. That's another one. I mean, just something that's dry, that you need to get that ball of tinder that is now starting to turn into fire into.
Yep.
And then that needs to catch next. And then
So the
you're going to have to feed that.
Yep, the tinder basically turns into like some form of an ember, and there's actually uh in the Navy, like when I say the Navy, I mean like the old, like the Continental Navy. They had a method of like I guess what we would refer to today almost as a cigarette lighter, but it was a flint striker, almost like the one I just held up a minute ago. But it just has like a piece of rope running through it, and the end of the rope stays, keyword fuzzy, and they have like a little flint striker, and it strikes the flint directly into the fuzzy end of this rope that hangs off of this lighter. And you can get them today. You can get modern reproductions of this, and they actually do still work. Uh, and you just blow on it, and it gets the little ember going on the end of the rope. And
Yep.
then, but that's where you need the kindling. And kindling can be something like if using the example you talked about earlier about starting a fire in your fireplace, practicing your bushcraft skills in your fireplace in your living room. Uh, the newspaper would be the kindling, or
Right.
that's where you can use leaves or pine straw or something like that. That would be the kindling. But if you try to strike the spark directly into a newspaper or directly into a pile of pine straw, it's not going to catch. So you do need that first part, which is that tinder part, to catch the spark, make the ember. Ember ignites the kindling. Kindling ignites the small sticks. You build up enough heat, and then you can throw a log on. Um,
Right.
and this is where the expression "where there's smoke, there's fire" comes from, because when you're doing like a primitive style of fire making, or that bushcraft style of fire making using a ferro rod or whatever like that, or one of these flint strikers, if you can produce smoke, there is enough heat to start a fire. You just have to know what you're doing. And then,
Right. And I
like,
think that is key right there. That is
yep,
key, what you just said, because you can't just light that, shove everything in there, and walk away to go prepare oh, okay, I'm going to make it chicken. I'm making chicken next. No, you need to. It's like a new relationship. You need to cultivate that thing. Like, you really need to get in there and you need to blow on it. All right.
massage it.
You need to massage that little little piece of ember, that smoke, into a raging fire.
I think I have heard somebody, and I now wish I'd committed it to memory, but I think there is like a little saying that's like, where you treat your ember like a woman, and you do this and you do that, and then it lights into a fire. I think there's a whole saying. I'll have to look that up. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you need to really, it makes us kind of sound like I can assure you that I am not a pyromaniac, but
Oh, I am.
what you listen, I love fire, right? I love making a fire. I love building a fire. If there is ever a party or a situation where there's going to be a bonfire, I'm on it. You guys go set up everything else. I got the fire, and we will have a raging fire in no time at all. Um, but you have to kind of love it, and you have to understand what makes fire happen in order to do it right. You can't. I
Correct.
mean, it's weird because I think it goes back to that movie, to the movie Backdraft. When I think Robert De Niro's talking to one of the Baldwin brothers about you have to love it. You have to understand the way that fire moves and fire works. That
It's a
initial
living,
stage,
breathing thing, Brian.
McAfee, Brian McAfee.
Brian
It's
McCaffrey.
it's in that kindling stage of fire, you need to be there, and you need to, like I said, cultivate that thing into a large flame. And it's going to be, you may have started with a good nest of kindling wood, but you have to have more. You have to have a lot more ready to add on to that to get
Mhm.
that flame going. um
I'm repeating these terms on purpose, and just in case anybody thinks I'm autistic or whatever. But when we're starting with the tinder, going to kindling, going to small sticks, going to wood, like this is one of the survival like rules of thumb that I was always taught. Again, I was taught this as a Cub Scout, and it was reinforced when I went through like survival training in the military. Uh, the rule of thumb is gather as much when you're in that small sticks
yes,
moving into wood phase. The rule of thumb is gather as much as you think you need, and once you think you have enough, double it.
right,
So
yep,
that's your like, because you go through, especially when you're in a, again, when you're in a situation where you actually legitimately need the fire, either to stay warm for survival or to purify water or whatever. You go through fire, or I'm sorry, you go through fuel, your wood, like very, very quickly, quicker than you think. So the rule of thumb is gather as much as you think you need and then double it. And then,
and,
another, go ahead.
well, and y'all can do research. You can hit the Google box just like everyone else here. The the circumference or the diameter of a log will tell you how long that will burn. So, depending on how big the logs are, once you get to that stage, you'll understand how much firewood you really have and how long that fire will keep going. If we have time, I'm sure we'll get into there are definitely some hacks out there that can make it easier for your stoking of a fire or keeping your fire lit throughout the night. But go ahead, Jamie.
Oh no, and I was, when I was again going back to, it's funny that like all these things that I learned like as a kid, as a Cub Scout, are actually the techniques and stuff that I still apply now because they work, because they haven't changed in 1,000
Right.
years, and
Right.
so like I use, once I've gotten my tinder and kindling and I'm moving into the part where I now have a flame, and I want to actually build it up into a campfire or whatever, or a cooking fire or whatever I'm trying to do. There, the way you arrange your sticks and wood, there's the TP method, which kind of like is
Yep.
like Lincoln logs, where you lay two and then two,
Yep.
and you make a wider base, and then it goes up and makes like a log cabin. I always called it the log cabin method.
Yep.
That's still like my preferred method that I still use to this day, that I learned when I
I
was a Cub
agree.
Scout.
Yep.
There's like the TP method, where once you have your tinder and kindling kind of smoldering, you just build like a TP of sticks all the way around it, because the heat goes up and then it catches and it collapses in on itself, and then you can start a fire that way. But another thing to consider, especially if you are using a fire as a means of survival, again for water purification, for signaling, for just keeping yourself warm, you also need to think, this goes into the preparation piece, you also need to think forward, like Chris said, what is the next step going to be? If you're in a survival situation, you don't want to be constantly starting all the way back over from zero every time you need a fire. So you also need to think about, how am I going to move this fire from one location to the next? Like how can I put in all this time and effort and preparation and struck a spark and nursed it up into a flame and stayed warm last night, but now I need to move on to the next location. How can I transport this with me? And there's things you can do, like depending on the clothing that you're wearing, you can cut off a piece of your clothing and you can create like what's called char cloth, which will make it extremely easy to catch a spark to turn into a fire at another location. So you can prepare that way. You can make, there's techniques where you can take like dried animal dung and that will smolder for hours and hours and hours without turning into a flame, and you can just carry that from one place to the next. Or you can make a fire bundle, which is basically like taking like the natural material that you have around you, like small sticks and pine straw and everything, and basically making kind of what amounts to like a big cigar, and having that smolder as you move your fire from one location to the next. So you're not always having to start from zero. But then that goes into the, what we've talked about before, like which type of survival are we in? Are we doing self-rescue? Or are we waiting to be rescued? Or are we just camping? So,
right now, one of the things that you can do, I mean, whether you're going to transport to another location. And here's the other thing, through all of this, I think we're all under the kind of the assumption and the understanding that we do have a knife. And I think that is obviously, I like the knife a little bit more than an axe or a hatchet around the campfire. Around the campfire, we're going to go with that. You can get a little bit more dialed in, a little bit more surgical, if you will, getting kindling, or even tinder. You can use a knife and a log and baton it through smaller logs to create the most fine pieces of kindling that you can. You can take that knife and you can create the feather sticks. Whether you're doing it, always cut away from yourself, be careful, obviously. There's methods where you just jam that knife into a stump, and instead of using the knife to do it, you just pull the sticks back across the edge of the knife, and you're creating those feather sticks.
yep.
And I think that's a multifaceted tool. Do you need some sort of tool to gather larger pieces of wood? Yes, but that's a saw, in my opinion, more than an axe. And you got to think. You got to do an analysis on energy versus tool, right? I mean, an axe, sure, but you're swinging that thing a lot more. And I don't know if you're using more energy doing that or a saw, but the chance to, well, I guess you can go down a rabbit hole on what's better, but I like the knife method because, like I said, then you could baton it down. You can get a little bit more control over it. You could going back to Jamie's moving the fire, you could start with a log and kind of cross section it at the end, and
Oh yeah.
kind of wedge that thing open and create kind of a torch, if you
Yep.
will. And then you now bring that torch with you, and it's dual purpose. It's to light the way, and also, well, multi-purpose, really. Light the way, keep away potential animals, and then create a new fire somewhere else. Just again, my 2 cents there.
So to you, the listener,
Yes.
Chris and I just have a very basic outline on some of these podcasts, and today is one of those times. And it's so funny. Like, this is one of those things, like when we were at Resurgence in Oklahoma, and Paul made the point that, like, before Resurgence, he and I had never met each other before.
Right.
But and he was trained in the Army and I was trained in the Navy, but after spending 15 minutes together, it was very evident that we had basically received the exact same type of training, and our two training methods like went together like peanut butter and jelly. So this is another one of those things where if you've had good training and a good foundation of experience, it kind of all comes together, because Chris just made a fantastic point, and was not pre-rehearsed anyways where I was going with that whole thing. But because you can get through my experience, a good like fixed blade camp knife, and then not even a big one, just a small saw that's like 12 inches. Like, that's your two best tools for like preparing firewood and gathering firewood. And Chris was referencing a technique called batoning with a fixed blade knife. And if you have a good folding knife that's big enough, you can do it with a folding
Yeah.
knife as well. Like, I would probably feel comfortable doing it with the knife that I carry in my daily carry knife. But a good fixed blade camp knife is a very valuable asset. And so batoning the knife means basically you find a piece of wood that's maybe, 4 or 6 inches in diameter, or I'll say that 4 to 6 inches in diameter. And you just put the blade of the knife on the log, and then you find like another, like a tree limb or something to hit your knife
Right.
with. And you, in a very controlled and safe manner, you're able to split, a pretty decent sized log if you have a good knife and a good and you find a tree limb that has enough weight behind it, and you can actually effectively split logs like that with just, you don't really need a hatchet or an axe. Those are good to have
Sure.
if you
You're
can
right.
have them.
Yeah.
But
And just to kind of take that a step further, I've done it with larger pieces, but you just have to take it down piece by piece. You can start
mhm,
at the edge of that log and just start taking off a little bit at a
yep,
time. And then
100%.
when you get down to those really, really small pieces, if you were to try and use an axe to get it even smaller, you can't. But you can literally baton through and make very fine pieces of kindling, or even, a form of tinder, I guess, if you will, if you get really good with it. But um so, not rehearsed,
But
but great
no, no,
point.
no. And again, I grew up on Bugs Bunny cartoons, or watching Popeye or whatever, and in all these cartoons, you watch the guy in the cartoon like chopping down a tree with an axe, and it
Right.
looks easy and it looks quick and whatever, but um, chopping through like either large tree limbs, or either like trying to chop down a whole tree, or trying to chop through a tree that has already fallen over, a felled tree. Um, with an axe or a hatchet, like just straight up, if you've never done that before, like, it is
Yeah,
hard and
it
it
is.
sucks, and it's very
Yeah.
time consuming, and it's very inefficient. So that's why I wanted to make the point that, like, a saw, and you can go to Walmart, you can go to Target, you can go to like gas stations, and they have like this brand of camping gear. It's called Coglins. It comes in like
Yeah.
the little green and yellow packaging. Like, Coglins makes this little like survival saw that costs like $3. And I have
Yeah.
one still that I got when I was like 19 years old. And cut, when you're trying to make bigger wood into smaller wood, like
Right.
you're trying to cut logs or split logs or whatever, the saw is so easy. It's so much easier than trying to chop through it with an axe or a hatchet, or even a fixed blade knife. And so that's why, in gathering firewood and preparing firewood, if I had to choose only two things, I would choose a good fixed blade camp knife and an actual a saw. A
Yeah.
saw makes your life so easy, so much
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. Everyone knows, I've talked about them numerous times. The Dead Moose Ops knives, for
Mhm.
me, are my go-to for that camp knife. It's got a big fat spine to it. It's heavy. It's a chopper, but also, I mean, you can do a lot with it. So, um, having the right knife is important. I I'll always have a fixed blade and a folder.
Yeah.
I'll use the folder to cut the chicken that I just made on the open fire, and I'll use the other one to do everything else. But Um, so that's the, that, I mean, that's a couple of the tools. And so now you've got this tinder bundle flaming, and now you have flames happening. Like, you got the fire happening, and all of the, you start getting some coals down at the bottom, which is the key
Yes.
to the longevity of this, is the coals. And then you have to start putting the logs on, and don't just go get a 4-foot log and a 7 inches in diameter and throw it on there, because again, you're gonna have a bad day.
And if you're in a survival situation, or if I mean, even if you're camping somewhere where it's really cold, you're not camping somewhere on a nice warm summer night. You're camping somewhere where you actually need the warmth of the fire, like Chris said, like actually burning. The flames are nice. That's what we call Ranger TV. You just sit there and stare at the flames. But the flames are cool to look at and watch Ranger TV. But the generation of heat's actually going to come from the coals. And so if you are in whatever situation, either just regular camping or survival or whatever in between, where you actually need the warmth of the fire, it's also important to make a backstop or build a backstop that will reflect the heat back off in a certain direction, so your heat is not escaping in all directions.
Right.
So that was one of the points I was going to make, where one of our upcoming podcasts will address shelter building, which is actually your number one priority in a survival situation. A lot of
Right.
people mistakenly think that water is your top priority, but actually it should be shelter, based on
Right.
everything that I have been trained.
Right.
Shelter is what should be your number one priority in a survival situation. But when you're building a fire in conjunction with that shelter, when you're in a situation where your life depends on it, you do need to either make some sort of um, stone, or like Chris just said, you don't want to put a huge, massive log on the fire, because it's probably not going to burn. And with that in mind, like a big, huge tree that has fallen over that has a big, massive, thick tree trunk, that makes a good backstop that can reflect heat back onto you, because that massive tree trunk is probably, even though it is wood, it's probably not going to catch fire, because it's just too big and just too dense. So you can build stone, you can make your shelter by a fallen tree, and when you get your fire going, reflect that heat back onto you. Or if you're in an area where it's like desert or mountain, where you can be like up under a rocky alcove, or like I said, make a stack of rocks or whatever. You just want to be able to direct that heat in whatever, in a specified direction, not just having your heat escape in all directions,
Right.
unless you're camped in
Right.
a nice warm summer spot and you want to watch Ranger TV. But
Right. Um, and then obviously one of the things is keeping that fire going all night. Um, the coals, they produce the heat, but you need to keep the coals happening, which is going to happen from the burning of these logs. There are some techniques out there where you can take um, smaller, thinner pieces of tree limb and stake them into the ground to create columns, if you will. And then you can cut equal lengths of log on an angle and slide them in those two supports. And so you have a stack of wood, and you let gravity and the fire continue to feed your fire all night. So that first log is on the fire, and when it starts to burn, the next one kind of rolls down on top of it. And that will, it's not perfect. You're probably going to have to check on it, but it is a way to continually feed the fire. There's another one where you take 4 logs and you create a cross,
Yep.
and in the middle of that is where your fire is, and then it's literally 4 points of wood always touching that fire. So
And one of the methods I have used is like kind of, not a big, massive oak tree that was 100 years old or anything, but a decent sized tree that was probably where the tree trunk is 6 to 8 to 10 inches in diameter. It's too big to cut into firewood. But if you can just cut the end off of it, you can kind of just systematically like feed it lengthwise into your fire. And as it burns down, you just feed a little bit more and feed a little bit more and feed a little bit more. The bad part about that is if you're trying to have your fire go all night, that requires you to keep getting up to
Right.
tend it. But another point that Chris just hit on that's very important, I think, is understanding that this is definitely what I would call more of an art than a science.
Yes.
Because like one of the people I really respect most in the world, and especially in the world of survival and bushcraft and everything, is I really have a lot of respect for Les Stroud. And he kind of
Yep.
became famous from the TV show Survivor Man. And I've read his books. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him, and this guy definitely knows what he's talking about. He is just a wealth of survival knowledge and experience. And you can learn a lot from watching him on that show Survivor Man. I think there's 5 seasons, and you can I have Apple TV, so I watch it on Apple TV even still. And one of the things that's kind of always stands out, and I think it's a good thing because it's a good thing to really understand, is you can be a stone cold, experienced expert that is versed in every type of fire making, with either by using, some of these tools that we've talked about that you can buy, some of these pieces of gear, versus, straight up primitive survival, primitive fire making, where you're sourcing every piece of it from your immediate environment, and everything in between. Because there's episodes of Survivor Man where he gives himself one match to start out, and he has to make that one match count. And then all of the episodes of Survivor Man, for the I think for the first couple of seasons, his goal was always to do 5 days, and then I think in the later seasons he started doing 10-day survival excursions. But and there was a couple where he gave himself one match or something like that. But anyway, he definitely knows what he's doing, and he definitely knows what he's talking about, and he definitely has a shit ton of experience, and he has definitely built fires a million times in 100 different environments, and it's still very challenging for him sometimes. It's like there are still times when he can't get the fire going, and there's still times where he has to completely abandon plan A and go to plan B. And so building a fire is definitely one of those things where you have to practice. Even if you get some new piece of gear, take it out in your freaking backyard and use it. That's what I did with my daughter. There's like a little, my driveway, there's a tree on one side of my driveway. So underneath the tree is just this little dirt area with some rocks. And I take my daughter out there with my little fire kit. Here's my other one. And I have my daughter just pick 2 things out of the fire kit and make a fire. And so even somebody that is a stone cold credentialed expert, making a fire sometimes is just hard, and sometimes it might be impossible. So this is definitely one of those things that you need to practice, you need to train on. Gear helps,
right?
But you also need to have a foundation to fall back on beyond whatever your little piece of gear is.
Yeah. Now, and and that's a great point. And what I want to kind of follow up with what you just said is the key, especially in a survival situation, cold weather, whatever the case may be, is to not panic if you are having a hard time. Don't start to freak out. You have to remain calm. You have to keep your wits about you during that, because if you can't, it's not going to make it any better. So I think that's a good thing to kind of to leave you all with. This is a skill that you can practice in your home, in your living room, in your fireplace, out back in the woods. You can easily practice making fire with as primitive as a bow and drill. You can go on Amazon and you can buy a bow and drill kit, and learn. And then once you learn on the kit, because in their little top piece there's a bearing. You're not going to find that, so you're going to have to understanding the thing helps you know the thing and learn it, and then you can recreate it. But 100%, this is an easy thing to practice and to get good at. Will you master it? Probably not, because there's outside factors that will always trip you up. But
Yep.
folks, as always, these are the fun episodes for me. We can sit here and talk about guns all day long and firearm stuff, but I love the other side, or the all other aspects of being a survivalist in today's day and age. So thank you, as always, for spending some time. We have still just scratched the surface, and I'm sure we'll come back to this again, but go out there, do a little bit of research, pick up a ferro rod, and start practicing, start building some fires. Jamie?
When I was a kid, so I told you, I went from Tiger Cub to Cub Scout to Webelow to Boy Scout, and I never went on to Eagle. But one of the reasons why I never went on to Eagle Scout was around about, I'd been a Boy Scout for maybe a year and a half, and then I because I grew up in the middle of freaking nowhere, and so like my friends and I, we kind of started to think like we didn't need it anymore. Like, hey, like we can go off into the woods and we can practice this survival stuff on our own, and we can learn this stuff on our own. We don't need to do this Boy Scout camp out. We can just go, like just us. And I had a friend named Kelly, and he was a boy named Kelly. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I used to always say like that guy, and I mean I recognized this when I was 12 years old. That guy could set a wet washcloth on fire. Like, and wow. Earlier you referenced like being a pyromaniac, and like I was kind of like that, and I was kind of impatient, and I wanted to be like James Bond and get this fire going in 5 minutes and impress everybody, whatever. But I recognized that like Kelly like was doing some sort of magic where I swear, like I almost still stand by that statement today, that I think that kid could set a wet washcloth on fire.
Awesome.
And
well,
so I was like, well, what is he doing differently than me? And it was exactly what you just said. It's just, don't be impatient, don't rush, calm down, understand the forces at work and work with them, not work against them. And later on in life, when I really got into four-wheeling and off-roading and like extreme backcountry camping and stuff, one of the guys I used to go off-roading and camping with was a former British Army guy. And his little saying for everything, like whether you had a mechanical breakdown on one of our vehicles, or had a flat tire, or getting a fire started, he would always say, step one is brew a cup of tea. And it's exactly what you were just talking about. That he doesn't mean literally brew a cup of tea. He means figuratively brew a cup of tea, which is stop.
Right.
Assess what you have, assess what's going on, make a plan, slow down, think logically, think methodically. But because he was British, his way of conveying that idea was just say, step one in any situation is always brew a cup of tea.
Got it.
So like everybody knows, I'm always a big fan of training, and this is no different. This is something that you can totally train on your own, because fire making is mostly done by trial and error. Yep. And you'll figure out what works and what doesn't, and you will get better at it just by getting sets and reps. So go out there, go in your backyard, go in your driveway, practice it, bring your kids with it, have them practice it, and remember that it's easy to be hard and it's hard to be smart.
Awesome, guys. Okay, you stay safe out there. ZP002 out.